Hello, my couture crafters. This is going to be a big video. I'm going to try not to make it too long, but I get the feeling it's going to be a longer video. I probably should cut this into two parts, paper and then ink, but I don't know. We'll see how long it takes me to just talk about paper. So usually in the stamping world, we stamp on cardstock, not regular copy paper. Regular copy paper would be the paper that you have in your printer. This is just regular printer paper. It's super thin and it does not hold up that great to stamps, markers, watercolor, any of that. It's just regular paper. So what we use is cardstock. Now you can get cardstock at your big box stores like Hobby Lobby, Michaels, and Joann's. And that cardstock is great. The paper stacks that you usually see look like this. Hobby Lobby has their own brand. Joann's has their own brand. Michaels has its own brand, Recollections. That's the one that I find that I use most often. I do use Joann's and Hobby Lobby too, but Michaels is usually my go-to, probably because it's closest to me. Michaels has nice paper. It is not the world's most luxurious paper, but it's got tons of different color options and it's super affordable, especially if you can catch it with the sale or something like that. Now here's what the paper looks like at Michaels, and here you see it says 65 pounds. Copy paper, if my mind serves me correctly, is like 18 or 25 pounds, something along those lines. 65 pounds will make a card for you. It's card stock. It's not cover weight though. Cover weight would be a heavier pound in paper. These stacks that you get here with the pretty little colors and all that are usually 65 pounds. Michaels has recently started making a heavier card stock, which is 100 pounds. And nice. It's nice. It will hold up to some media and stamping. And I love using it. This is Michael's 100-pound cardstock. You can hear the difference in the way it sounds. This is lovely for card bases. So usually you'll fold your card and then you'll start to add panels on top of it. When you're adding panels, you want to use the 65-pound cardstock for most occasions, okay? When you're just adding layers, you want to make it thinner so that it's not super duper heavy and it's easier to mail. The more of these you stack on top of one another, they'll begin to be almost like a brick, like you're building a brick, especially if you're using wet glue. I don't know how it works, but it just starts to get kind of heavy. So of course, rules are meant to be broken. You can fold this and just use this if you want. But most people use a heavier cardstock as the base, and then they add lighter cardstock on top of it, like 65 pounds. This is just a 65-pound sheet from this stack here. This one isn't open, but you get the picture. 100-pound cardstock, cover weight. Also, if you are doing Copic coloring, you want to use a heavier cardstock. The cardstock that I use for my Copic coloring is the Neenah. And when they say Neenah, it's N-E-E-N-A-H, I think. I think that's how you spell the Neenah. And I use the Classic Crest 80 pounds. They also have 100-pound paper too. This is some of the most luxurious paper that you can get in a big bulk stack. I buy a big bulk and it just lasts me for probably about the year. It's 80 pounds. I don't use it as my base. However, the issue that you run into is when you want to use this as a card base and then you want to use this paper on top, you can see that it's two different color whites. So try to keep your whites in the same family if you can, just so that it blends nicely. But when I am stamping and I'm getting ready to Copic color, and that's using these alcohol markers right here, any kind of alcohol markers, I use this paper, 80 pounds. I like it. It's luxurious. Another kind of paper that you see in the stamping world is glossy cardstock. This is not photo paper. This is glossy cardstock by Ranger. And I want to say it's got like a clay coating on it. It's a little different. It takes stamps lovely, and there's a lot of great techniques you can do with it. I will be experimenting and playing with this paper through the series. At least I'll do for sure one card. that I'm going to do with this. This is glossy paper. It is not the same thing as photo paper. This particular paper is by Ranger, and I'm sure there are other stamping companies that carry glossy paper. Watercolor paper is something else that stampers use. If you are going to stamp on watercolor paper, cold watercolor paper has a texture to it. I don't know if you can see that, but it's got a texture. It's kind of got some bumpiness to it on the front and the back side. This is cold press. I thought I had some hot press watercolor paper, but I don't. Hot press is smooth. So think about the heat is melting the paper so that it's smooth. If you are going to stamp on watercolor paper, I suggest you use a stamp platform. Something like the Misty. Where's my Misty? Usually it's right here. Ouch, there it is. Something like the Misty or the Tim Holtz stamp platform. So that way you can stamp repeatedly in the same spot, but you'll get a good impression. You'll be able to really press down on it because those little ridges, even though they seem super tiny, they will make a big difference in how you can stamp. But it's doable, and people do lots of watercoloring techniques. If you're into watercoloring on with using stamps, check out Christina Warner for, you know, all the things, because she's a card queen for sure. Something else you might want to look into is this Bristol paper. Bristol's paper is super smooth. It's a heavier weight paper. This is 100 pounds. It's really good for ink blending, and I'll definitely show you guys some ink blending techniques. Something else you can use as a card base if you'd like. It is beyond smooth. So pretty. And it's great for different types of techniques too, but Bristol paper, when people are getting ready to do some ink blending, sometimes they like to use this. That Nina paper will work fine too, but you'll find that the other papers just soak up the ink and you're not able to blend as smoothly as you'd like sometimes. Something else that's kind of newer and a specialty paper is Yupo paper. Have you ever heard people say it and you're like, what are they saying? Hupo? Or it's so hard to know what people are saying. Yupo, Y-U-P as in Paul, O. And this is great for alcohol ink techniques. You just put your alcohol on here and it tends to spread and do something kind of funky. Yupo paper is very difficult to tear. It's like a plastic kind of paper. It's not truly paper, but it's paper-esque. And here's some Yupo paper, and it's alcohol ink techniques that's not dry, but it's very difficult to tear. Matter of fact, I don't think you can tear it. You can cut it, but you can't rip it. Synthetic. And again, alcohol ink, you just drip it on there, and it does some fun things and some techniques. And Yupo paper comes in and out of style all the time, so people will be doing a ton of alcohol ink and that kind of stuff, and they'll probably be using Yupo paper. You can also use glossy cardstock, but you'll see that there is a difference, and there's tons of YouTube videos that show you the difference between using alcohol ink on alcohol ink Yupo paper and regular glossy cardstock. Something else you'll see people use is vellum. Vellum is with a V as in Victor, and this right here is a clear sheet of vellum. Vellum comes in different colors. This here is clear, and as you can see through it, but it gives you kind of a hazy, soft look. See how it looks with the vellum, without the vellum, with the vellum, without the vellum. It's pretty. It's definitely a nice little soft, ethereal almost kind of glazing over your stamped images. You can actually stamp and emboss on vellum paper if you move quickly enough. Something else that you might see, acetate. What is just clear plastic transparency, but we like the one that's a little bit thicker. I don't know if you can see this because it's clear, but this has got some snap to it. It's got some give. You can stamp on this, and you want to use a special ink when you're stamping on this because it's such a slick surface, and all inks don't just stamp on here and they're not able to be rubbed off. You have to use special inks. Alcohol ink will go on what we call, this is called a non-porous surface. Porous means that it has texture. Non-porous would be your slick acetate, your glass, things like that. You can put it on here and it won't be able to be rubbed off simply by your hand. You can, however, add blending solution or alcohol and remove it. but you want to use StazOn ink or an alcohol ink when you're stamping or playing with transparency if you want to do something other than just, plop it over your cards. Okay, so that is paper. Now, should I keep going or should I stop? I think I'm going to stop and then do the next video. So in case people don't care about paper, they don't have to be worried about it. So thank you, Couture Crafters. We just talked about paper, and now we're going to get into ink.